Okay, here we go. Stand by. 3, 2, 1.
The thinking atheist. It's not a person. It's a symbol. An idea.
The population of atheists in this country is going through the roof.
Rejecting faith. Pursuing knowledge. Challenging the sacred.
If I tell the truth, it's because I tell the truth. Not because I put my hand on a book and made a wish.
And working together for a more rational world.
Take the risk of thinking for yourself. Much more happiness, truth, beauty, and wisdom will come to you that way.
Assume nothing. Question everything. And start thinking. This is the Thinking Atheist Podcast. Hosted by Seth Andrews.
Oh, I've been a bad example. I've been a bad boy. I'm a fugitive from justice. I'm lawless. Here's the story. I was coming back from a couple of tour stops in Texas. I'd spoken in Dallas, Texas, then I went down to Houston and left on Sunday around 1 o'clock p.m. from Houston Oasis. I was just going to drive all the way home. And I am not making this up. I'm not kidding. I was a great driver. I drove like 2 miles an hour over the speed limit all the way home, like 9 hours. I obeyed the law, okay? And one of the reasons is, and I got to admit this, a few weeks ago, I got pulled over for going a little bit fast, and I was given a warning. Now, I haven't had a speeding ticket in decades. My driving record is immaculate, okay? It's perfect. And so I didn't want to screw that up. And so I'm driving the limit. Got my audio book in. I'm just cruising right along. And 8 hours into my 9-hour drive, I end up going through this little one-horse town called Henrietta in Oklahoma. Henrietta, the highway goes through, and there's a stoplight, and then you go through this small section of highway or whatever, and I'm doing 65. Stop at the stoplight, and then I cruise back up to 65. Okay? No harm, no foul. But I was listening to my audiobook and apparently didn't see these little signs. And they didn't say 65 for no reason on a stretch of highway near nothing. I mean, there's nothing but highway. It said 45. And lo and behold, in my rear view, there are the police lights. Shit. Right? Shit. 9 o'clock at night. I'm tired. I'm cranky. I want to get home. I pull over. And this small town police officer, this Buford T. Pusser. By the way, that's a 70s reference. Buford T. Pusser was a real police officer. He's a real sheriff. Buford T. Pusser pulls me over and he walks up to the window and he's like, "License and insurance, please." And I was like, oh my God. I didn't even know what the speed limit had been, right? I mean, I thought it was 65 and I'd gone just a little bit over. The word speed trap going off in my mind, but I also know better than to try to weasel my way out of whatever's about to happen, right? Cops, they've heard every story, every excuse in the book. I'm late for work, my wife is pregnant, so-and-so's in a crisis, blah, blah, blah. I mean, why bother, right? I mean, the best thing to do is just hand over your stuff, own it, and hopefully you'll get some grace. So he takes my stuff and he goes back, and I can tell I'm getting a ticket because of the length of time it takes him to come back to the car. Finally comes back and he says, "You realize you were going 67 in a 45. Now I'm doing the math on that. I think over 20 miles an hour over the speed limit isn't just speeding. I think they can call that reckless driving. He's like, "I bumped her down to 55 in a 45, best I can do for you. Here's your ticket." And I'm just looking at this thing. "Thanks, officer. Slow down out there now tonight." "Yes, sir. Yes, sir." And then I drive away. So for 1/4 mile stretch in a 9-hour journey, I missed a speed sign and got caught, and now I have a ticket, and I'm just pissed. And the writing on the ticket is like a carbon copy. I can't read anything. I can't read what is there a fine? Is there an amount? And then there's a court date, which I thought said this. Apparently, it did not. So I had mailed my fine, $149, to the town of Henrietta. And you are welcome. Okay, Henrietta, you just enjoy that money. You go buy everybody some donuts and do whatever you're going to do with this speed trap revenue that I have sent your way. Okay. But the next day, I receive in the mail a letter that says, you have missed your court date. You failed to appear before the judge. Holy shit! I'm now in contempt of court. What? It's just been a few days. I'm lawless. I'm now a fugitive from justice. The men in dark sunglasses are going to show up at my door and they're going to haul me away to, like the town of Henrietta is going to send somebody an hour into Tulsa, Oklahoma to come get me. But, of course, your mind goes to places like, what does this look like on my record? What are the consequences? I call the court clerk and I'm like, look, you should have a check with my name on it. I just don't want the Gestapo to show up and do something to me. And I don't want anything bad on my record. And she laughed. And she's like, you're fine, honey. I love it when small town people call you honey. It's like going into a little restaurant, a little truck stop restaurant. And they call you, hey, darling, can I get you some pancakes? There's just something so endearing about that. I just love it. So she's like, don't worry about it, honey. Give me the ticket number. I said, don't worry about not being able to read the writing. That always happens. These police officers, their writing's just terrible. Don't you sweat it. Oh, no, look, you've got a zero balance. We got your money. And so that letter goes out automatically, and don't you just throw that in the trash, dear. Don't you worry about it. You are just fine. In fact, we don't report our tickets to the state, so it won't go on your record, okay? And I have two minds on this. One is, whew, my record remains clean. The second thought is, now I know this is a speed trap, right? Because it's not about the law. It's not about trying to make me a better driver and keep me in the straight and narrow under the limit. No, this is about $149. That's what that's about. So anyway, I'm walking around all the time telling people I'm lawless, fugitive from justice, I can't be governed. I can't be contained. So that's been the story I've been telling lately. Just an interesting and enjoyable anecdote to start the conversation today. What else is going on? Here's another anecdote. It's an example of how I'm not always the man I wish I could be. And I'm going to throw myself at your feet. I'm going to throw myself at your mercy in the hopes that you will give me the grace and mercy that the Henrietta police officer did not, because I screwed up. We went to go see Oppenheimer at the IMAX. I'm not going to give you any spoilers here at all, so you're safe. Oppenheimer, the new Christopher Nolan film starring Cillian Murphy, is brilliant. It is so thick and smart and challenging and amazing. I've never seen anything like it. Different than what I expected. I thought it was going to be more of a kind of a special effects showcase about bombs, knowing Christopher Nolan. But it was really more of a political thriller with so many gears in the machine, so many moving parts. I'm going to have to see it again, maybe twice more, just to catch everything that was happening. But it was a big deal. So there were four of us, took my family. And after the tickets, IMAX tickets and popcorn, we're talking over $100. So it was kind of a big deal. And we're in this packed matinee theater, and the trailers are playing. And I noticed the couple next to me, the man and a woman, and they're both pulling their phones out of their pockets and talking to each other. Now, I let this slide during the trailers, even though you know how I feel about people talking and texting in a theater. You've heard my rant about social contracts and how the sign says, don't be discourteous, don't talk or text, and people do it anyway. So I was already ramped up. The movie begins, a critical first 10 minutes, as all of the pieces start, coming into place. You really got to pay attention in a Christopher Nolan film. And during that first 10 minutes, to my right, this man and this woman continue to yank their cell phones out of their pockets and start talking to each other so loud that I notice even Natalie is distracted. She's looking over at them. I'm looking over at them. And before I realized I was doing it, I leaned over and I said, hey, stop talking. And this man, kind of a stocky, bearded guy, looked at me and he said, why don't you mind your own business and shut the fuck up? And I said, why don't you shut the fuck up? Oh my God, I just said it before I realized I said it. Why don't you shut the fuck up? And immediately, Natalie is like, she's sort of pushing me back and his wife is pushing. It's not like we were going to go to blows, but we were definitely having words right there in the middle of a dark theater. It was so, I have confronted people before, but this is the antithesis of the kind of behavior that I have been trying to exemplify in my life, which is being the adult in the room, right? Being a de-escalator. And I was guilty of all the things I've been condemning. And I sat there and I'm sure both of us were just ramped up. I'm sure he was over there steaming and I was over here steaming. And so the movie goes on for another half hour. Natalie, I'm sure, wanted to crawl into her chair. I'd embarrassed her and made her weird. And then he gets up to go to the bathroom. Now, I found out later that Natalie at this moment was concerned he was going to the parking lot to his car to get a gun and come back and kill me. I didn't know that at the time. But as he got up and he went out to the bathroom, I got up and I followed him out. And I could see him. He was walking down toward the men's restroom, and I was behind him. And I walk into the restroom, and there he is, and he's standing against the wall at the urinal. And I was over near the sink, and I let him see me. And the first thing I said was, man, I'm so sorry for blowing up at you in the theater. I'm sorry. I screwed up. And he smiled and he said, oh, don't worry about it. It's no big deal. I said, no. And then he said, well, the thing is my daughter was in a car wreck. And so we were getting text and we were trying to figure out if, what was going on. And I said, I'm sorry to hear that. But honestly, there's no excuse, no matter what you were talking about. I'm really sorry for my behavior. I totally screwed up. And he's like, well, I'm sorry too. I overreacted. And then there was a pause, and he looked at me and he goes, we're guys. Me, big man, kind of thing. And so I sort of segued over, and I'm standing at the wall, and another few moments passed. And I said, I apologized at the urinal. This is awkward. And we both busted out laughing again. And so we ended up back out in the lobby and we walked into the theater. He held the door for me and we both went back to our chairs. And Natalie just looked at me like, what the hell just happened? And I whispered in her ear, we are best friends now. And she smiled and everybody relaxed and we enjoyed the rest of the movie. But I was driving home. I really felt a sense of shame. What's that about? Yes, they should have gone to the lobby, okay. But I didn't know what the context was. They were going through a crisis. They probably weren't thinking about anybody else. They were thinking about their kid who could have been injured in a car wreck. There was something going on with their family. And my first thought was, you are inconveniencing me. I am watching the movie. And then I just went from zero to crazy. I just blew it. I just became what I despise. And so as we were driving home, we were kind of laughing about it, but I told Natalie, I'm like, I know I was wrong and I'm sorry I embarrassed you. And I hope you'll allow that I can kind of grow through failure here and that I'll do better. I'm going to make a commitment to try to Just be better next time. And she was laughing. And I said, I can be an asshole, but I'm also a good man. And she's like, you are a good man. It's okay. It's okay. So it was a lot over a little, but it's still something I kind of blush about. What's wrong with me? Why did I go there? Why did it bother me so much? Why did I turn on this guy so quickly? I've been thinking about that kind of thing. I didn't know him. He was the stranger. He was the other. And then I'm watching the film Oppenheimer, which is, rooted in the Second World War. And on the larger philosophical note, I'm thinking about the human desire and tendency, especially by men, to want to dominate and take over the world, right? I mean, Hitler wanted world domination. Japan's emperor, Hirohito, wanted world domination at that time, right? These were people who were willing to blow up the world, to consolidate power, to procure resources and dominate everybody and everything. And I keep thinking about who drew the border lines. We see the nationalist here in the United States. We're better than everybody else. We're superior to everybody else. And once you cross this line, which was drawn here at this river or at this point, this geographical location, once you take a step over that, now you are in inferior territory with inferior people. They matter less. Well, who drew the line? Like some human being, some subjective person drew that line. Who said the line can't be moved or changed or expanded or erased? Oh, there he goes. There he goes. He's going all John Lennon on us. Imagine a world. Imagine. Yeah, okay. Hey, somebody somewhere took a Sharpie and said, this land is my land. Why is that gospel? Why is that sacred? I just don't get it. This tribal thing, I get the benefit of tribes. I think I'm not opposed to having nations, but this idea that the lines are sacrosanct and that makes us superior and everybody else inferior. And then the dominionists want to go and they want to not just own what we have here inside the line. They want to go and own everything outside the line. They want everything in this block and that group and this continent, whatever. We are a planet that's been marked up on a map by somebody, somewhere, and we never stop to question who drew the line. And why would it make us more important than somebody else? Now, I was a Christian nationalist. I felt that we are superior. More than anybody else, God has picked us, right? And we are to go out and convert the world and make everybody like us. But when I came out of the faith, it was more like we are all brothers and sisters. We are all the human condition. I love my country, but it doesn't mean I love anybody else less. Why would it have to be binary? Why does it have to be a zero-sum game? Why can't I advocate for my neighbors on this part of the planet, but not cast out or vilify those who might be my further neighbors outside the fence? And what if I was to take down the fence and we could all share the planet together as human brothers and sisters? That's a fantasy of mine. And watching Oppenheimer and the development of the atom bomb to try to stop world domination by dominators, and then all the interworking politics and the power grab going on within the United States, just overwhelming. It's just overwhelming. At the very least, regarding one of the messages behind Oppenheimer, is I'm sick and tired of the dominionists trying to stomp out the rest of us. Let's take some calls. But first, short break. Be right back. Glad you're here. Thanks for listening. Thanks for your support. Commercial-free show. You get 2 days early if you become a patron. Patreon.com/Seth Andrews. To the switchboard we go. Alex, are you there?
I am.
What is on your mind?
Rebellion and reacting to pretty much what you just said. I've reached the point where not acting is causing harm. And I was living in Rochester Hills in a trailer park, Rochester Hills, Michigan. and my trailer was on a corner with the biggest bus stop in the entire park, basically. And I was seeing kids from elementary all the way to high school getting on and off the bus every day. So I started sitting in my window and just yelling out the window, God and Jesus are made up just like Santa and the Easter Bunny. I was telling them, hey, kids, Mom and Dad have to hate you. Jesus commands it in order for them to follow him. I was putting all kinds of Bible verses out there for kids. I was sending them over to the Atheist Experience, to your channel, to a lot of channels. Hugo and Jake, back when they were doing the Bible Reloaded. It was actually super successful. I had a lot of kids come back privately and talk to me and ask questions and get sources. I know for a fact I turned quite a few kids atheist. Some of the parents moved with their kids out of the park. Some parents showed up at my house and were circling the signs that I had in my yard, taking pictures and all kinds of craziness. But the word spread and nobody ever got physical with me. And the kids were sharing the information as well. And at the time, I was threatened with eviction from the park. I had all kinds of just backlash. Police were called. It was pretty nuts. I've recently moved to Highland, Michigan, into a very Trump-supporting park. My neighbor has a Trump flag hanging on his porch. So I'm telling you this to show you that we are making progress in the atheist community. We are waking people up. It's becoming normalized. I went to the office to ask for permission to put signs all over my house with the same Bible verses I used in Rochester Hills. And they said, absolutely, you can do that. Years ago in the other park, I was not allowed to do that and was threatened by the park itself. So it's progress that I'm being allowed to have the same freedom that my neighbor had, and I'm going to take full advantage of it. I plan to put the signs up this weekend, and there's a lot of kids, especially young girls, living directly on both sides of me. So I've already given a heads up to the women in those houses that I'm going to war against the men. Tell them to keep their hands off our bodies. And I'm going to post all the pro-abortion verses and the verse where Jesus commands hatred of one's own children, the verse where Jesus says he's going to make you eat your own sons and daughters. You know, tell the truth about Jesus that their mom and dad want them to commit their lives to. And it's stuff that's easy to look up in the Bible.
Well, I've got no problem.
I'm wondering what you think.
I've got no problem with presenting in a private forum, even your own property, your concerns and condemnations of the religion. But if we were to reverse the streams, and if you were boarding a bus or your kids were getting on a bus and somebody was nearby screaming out Bible verses and saying, you're going to hell.
Well, they're doing that here.
Okay.
They allow that here. They allow the churches, even one of them is an IFB church. They allow them to come in here and propagate their crap. That's what gave me the idea, was to counter the lies that the churches are telling and show the truth about what the Bible really says.
I would never be one to tell you to not do something that is bringing results. I myself blanch a little bit at the idea of yelling this stuff out at a bus stop in a public square at children. These are conversations that need to be had. I worry a little bit about the process and the efficacy overall of saying the Old Testament says God wants people to eat babies. The verse may be in there.
No, that's in Revelation.
Look, I
that's
know.
Jesus in Revelation.
Actually, it's the Old Testament too, I believe.
Yeah.
But it's, it is interesting. And I think on your own terms, certainly on your own property, within the boundaries of your own life, being able to express your lack of faith in any sort of, magical other out there and to condemn the atrocities in Scripture, I think those are valid and you have every right to do that.
It's been beautiful. I mean, I really thought I was going to get shot at some point, but I haven't. And I'm getting quite a bit of support from the women, which surprises me. It's waking them up too. So just know we are helping out there. We're doing what we can. I may be weird, but if I wasn't getting good results, I wouldn't keep doing it. So thank you for everything you do. I know you don't encourage necessarily some of the stuff that I do.
You and I may stand apart on the process, but I am interested in your story. And if you are, in fact, getting results, and perhaps you can update us on this 6 months down the way, okay?
I definitely will.
All right, hang in there, Alex. Appreciate you. What are your thoughts? You're at a bus stop. You know, there are a lot of religious kids who are getting on the bus, and you say, read your Old Testament. The Bible says God will burn you, or gays should be executed, or your parents in the book of Matthew are required to hate their children for the sake of Christ if it comes down to that, because it's all a divine popularity contest. Open your eyes, read your Bibles. If someone was shouting that over a parking lot, would that be effective to you? If it's effective to some, why is it effective? What are the ratios and percentages? I think this call brings about a lot of questions. It's not my thing. It's not what I would do, but I am interested in Alex's story, and I appreciate her sharing it. 703. Who's this?
Laura.
Laura, thanks for calling. What's on your mind?
Well, first of all, Mr. Andrews, I have been a fan of your radio show since I was about 16, so it's an honor.
Thank you. Thank you. And please call me Seth. Mr. Andrews just kills a part of my heart because it makes me sound like Methuselah. But you're very kind. You're very kind. Go ahead. What do you want to talk about?
Hey, Mr. Seth.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to talk about the issue of borders that you mentioned. I have to politely say that I disagree. I feel that stuff like that exists for a good reason, in both safety-wise and in terms of giving people a sense of identity who otherwise might not feel like they really have one. I also have to say, in terms of like national identity, and I know that this is a controversial view coming from an atheist, but I'm actually a fan of the two-state system, and I'm also, well, first of all, I'm a big advocate for my fellow disabled community. And I feel that the disabled community kind of feels like here in the U.S., they don't really see us. I feel that we need an Israel of sorts. It's like this. You know how, at least on paper, Israel is seen as the home of the Jewish community. The reservations are seen as something like that for the Native Americans, at least on paper. It's more complicated, but I wonder what it would be like if the disabled community had the option of going somewhere where it's our bodies, ourselves, our laws, ourselves. People without disabilities could obviously live there, but I wonder what it would be like if we had the option of being able to say, I'm not an American anymore. I live in whatever country would be specifically founded for people with disabilities.
Do you feel like that would cheat the larger, more healthy, I would say more healthy attitude that we are all the human condition? I mean, wouldn't it further marginalize disabled people to lock them away? I mean, many people would consider that to be, for lack of a better way of saying it, kind of an island of misfit toys. They would then be able to brush them off, lock them away. They would be othered. Isn't the goal to help those with disabilities actually be an equal part of life with the rest of us? Wouldn't that be a more worthy goal than segregation?
Agree. However, I would also consider it a comfort to know that there would be an option where it's people that actually get us because they are us. And we don't have that.
Well, I myself, would never try to nullify the perspective of someone who lives with a disability every single day. I think it's...
Yeah, I have cerebral palsy and I'm autistic.
I can't really feel what you have felt. I can't see the world through your eyes. And I understand also the healthy benefit of tribes, the community of people who suffer with cerebral palsy and autism, who can get each other, perhaps share a space, support each other. You can pursue common goals to raise awareness, even money for research to help cure or at least treat some issues. I totally understand the benefit, the pro-social and productive aspects of tribes. I myself struggle a little bit with the idea of people sort of cordoning themselves off away from the rest of us, because I worry that a greater effect beyond the community you might feel is that you would be further cast off. and not given the opportunities that we seek for everybody and to share the world equally. I don't know. It's an interesting idea that I've never heard said in that way before. Can you kind of let me chew on that for a while, and everybody in the listening audience, and have some discussion about it?
Also, I kind of feel that in terms of disability advocacy, yeah, we have plenty of equivalents to Susan B. Anthony and Martin Luther King, but where are our equivalents to Emmeline Pankhurst and Malcolm X? Sometimes the non-disabled majority needs to fear us. I understand why you wouldn't want a blind person with a gun, but
wait, hang on.
Physically do that. Where are
to
our
fear you? No.
cancers?
Help me understand. Why would you want someone to fear you? Give me a context for that.
Because sometimes that's the only way that you can get people's attention. Sometimes you need muscle behind a revolution.
And you would support in that context the use of force and or violence against ableists?
So long as it was within a context of not hurting innocent people and only against those who are intentionally trying to hurt us.
Who would make that determination?
Like storming of the Bastille.
But how would you make the determination? Where would the line be drawn? I'm going to commit violence against this person because they are an agent of harm. Who would set the line? Who would determine what harm is specifically, and how would you know?
I am not sure, but that's why we need a community to know.
So a community would decide a guideline, a specific, someone says this sentence or tries to submit or propose or pass this law, they would then be an agent of harm against the disabled, and we would then warrant or condone violence against them. Am I understanding that?
Yeah, there are some laws within the U.S. where it's like the early stages of what T4 ended up being. I mean, they're not killing us outright, admitting to it, but they're making it so, well, you might as well say that you want to. You're acting like you wish we weren't here.
Do you see it opening the door to a kind of reactive anarchy? People subjectively say, you've harmed me. Now I'm going to pull out a baseball bat or a gun or run somebody over in a crowd, justified because I feel subjectively harmed. I'm not trying to marginalize
pacifism when it works.
I'm not an opponent.
I feel that violence should only be the absolute plan Z. However, sometimes plan Z is necessary.
Okay, well, I'm not opposing pushback, even by force, against aggressors against you. I'm just trying to understand, does someone qualify aggression as a word spoken? If someone says a certain word, is violence warranted against them?
If someone says it would be better if we were all dead, if someone says that they do not view us as equals no matter how hard we try, if someone says that they are inherently more human than us because they quote unquote look the part, I feel that that is the early stages of genocidal ableism.
I myself want to express first and primarily that I understand the tremendous frustration that the disabled feel in a world that has purposefully, in many cases, been not fashioned for them. They've been dismissed and discarded. I have real concerns about calls for violence against people who have not been approached violently first. That's a conversation I think we're probably going to...
this is only if we've been approached first. This is self-defense.
If someone speaks a word against you, even protected speech, which is hate speach, I worry about living in a world where someone subjectively says,
the group homes where they're letting people starve.
If I'm not talking about...
Someone needs to storm the Bastille.
If someone is starving people to death, it is different than I have spoken a hateful word, which is sadly, but necessarily protected as free speech. The way to defeat that, I would argue, is not to pull a gun and shoot them in the street and call it self-defense. I worry about that kind of thinking. And I think that's fair, don't you?
I don't advocate for shooting people for speaking. I feel that we need to be able to defend ourselves against physical, emotional, sexual, and mental harm.
Okay, well, now we're talking about someone who is perpetrating physical harm, which is a different conversation. It's like the punch a Nazi crowd. What they do is they say that someone who hates.
I'm sorry. I have the image in my head of Sean Spicer.
All right, but
Not that I advocate violence out of nowhere, but.
Well, I appreciate your call very much, and we'll perhaps chat down the way, okay?
It was lovely to be on the show.
Thank you. Where I was going with that is if you run into a white supremacist on the street, someone who doesn't believe in equality and believes that people of color, et cetera, are not of equal status, not even human, is the way to defeat that to sucker punch them in the street. And there's a culture of people, I understand their frustration, who believe that is how we solve the problem. I don't think we sucker punch our way to a better world. I think it feels good in the second. We watch the video of somebody getting their ass kicked. A neo-Nazi gets pummeled with a fist in the street. We're like, yeah, fuck that guy. I understand the emotional response, the satisfaction in the moment. I just don't think that's how we fix the world. And I don't think that's an unreasonable concern. These are difficult conversations, aren't they? They're certainly hot button conversations, but I think we should be able to talk about them. I've got Matthew. Thanks for calling. What do you want to talk about?
I've talked to you a few times. I've always been a huge fan of your work, by the way. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I heard you and Matt Dillahunty recently speaking about the 12-step program. I think you guys were maybe at a conference. I was curious your thoughts on the 12-step concept, because I myself am a recovering addict. I am an atheist and a pretty vocal humanist. And I know that we maybe had some disagreements there, but I think some of it may just be misunderstanding. So I'm really just curious to flesh that out a little bit, if that's okay.
My opposition to Alcoholics Anonymous and the 12-step program isn't that it hasn't worked for some people. In fact, for that reason, I will tell people who are recovering addicts that if the program helped you, I would never be the one to negate that. I would never be the one to say you shouldn't have done it. You know, if it has helped you, then good for you. My challenge with AA is that it wasn't begun from a science-based framework, and it relies heavily on the concept of a higher power. You put your trust or faith, you have an anchor in some other somewhere, and they're kind of nebulous about what that is. My challenge with that 12-step model is that it sort of robs you of responsibility, and it cheats you of a feeling of real accomplishment when you do the heavy lifting of beating addiction. You know, it's saying essentially you don't have it within you. Lean on a higher power. I think that's a legitimate concern, right? Don't you?
It is. Yeah, absolutely. I will say, I think that's a great takeaway. So I'm not arguing with you. I just, I want you to, if you can, just maybe hear a little different perspective. So like myself, my sponsor, like a long line of the people that I'm in the Narcotics Anonymous program with, we're pretty much all atheists. Like, I mean, there are so many religious people in our community, but like a lot of us are working towards, we have what they call like a conference agenda report. And I won't bore you with all the details, but it's where we get together every couple of years and work towards changing the language in our literature. You know, some of it is an appeal to tradition. We see that fallacy along the lines of, you know, how it was written. And a lot of us see those problems, you know. A lot of us are more focused on like the community aspect of, you know, when I got clean, I needed somebody that had been there. You know, I needed somebody to call and say, you know, hey, Seth, look, I don't know why I'm thinking about using, you know, but I am. And, you know, somebody who had said, hey, look, I've been there. This is how I did it. It really does help, you know, that sense of community. I have an undergrad in psychology. It's kind of my thing. And that's the kind of nursing that I do. And we see it a lot. And I really think that if you can remove some of the religious language from the program, and a lot of us have, I can't speak for people as a whole, but I can say that for me, it helped a great deal, because it wasn't just about the higher power at that point. You know, it was about the power greater than myself was the people around me that helped me with my addiction that had been there. And, you know, that unifying concept of, hey, together we can. You know, that's a recurring theme in our literature. You know, together we can.
When I hear community, I don't think God. I don't think spirits.
Neither do I.
I don't think higher power. I hear shared experience and human support and love and
strength and hope.
No gods, no monsters. You know, to me, that sounds like the kind of thing I could really get behind. And it's only whenever people have their agency removed that I start to become concerned. But if it has helped you, man, I'm just glad that you are on the other side. And I'm glad that you've had success. And I wish you an addiction-free life of freedom and happiness, love, and goodness.
Absolutely. Well, and so I completely agree with that. I think that the net is very big. You know, it's kind of one of the biggest dogs in the fight, the whole 12-step program. I think that we still have a lot of reform with regards to the language, some of the religious language, some of the very gender-specific language. You know, we recently have voted on the idea of doing away with this terminology of God, you know, for people that prefer to say higher power or whatever. I think that, like you said, I agree that the core tenets don't have to involve a lot of that. I guess I just wanted to give you a different picture. You know, a lot of us don't feel that way.
I don't think you and I disagree. I hear a lot. There are also some secular sobriety programs out there that are starting to get noticed, and they do the same thing. It is about community. I think they may be a little more focused on the science of addiction. How is the body acting and reacting to substances? The psychology behind addictive behaviors, and then really focusing not on gods or higher powers, but on the power that we have as human beings. And if AA does more of that and the 12-step programs do more of that moving forward, I would be delighted. But I think you and I largely line up, and I wish you all success in your journey, okay?
We definitely do. And hey, Seth, thank you again for everything you do. I can't wait to see you at the next event you speak at, buddy.
Hey, very kind.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. We'll see you later.
Yeah.
256. Is it Dan?
Yeah, Dan.
Appreciate you, man. What's up? What do you want to talk about?
Well, I had a personal story I was wanting to tell you, but I'm listening to the previous conversation. I just had a comment about borders and national identity.
Mm-hmm.
And, I was born and raised in the U.S. I live here, but through work, I have the opportunity to travel about 200 days a year through Africa, Europe, Middle East, Asia. And through my experiences, the one thing I've determined is that we're really all the same. When you have the opportunity to get to know personally an African or a German or a Greek or someone from the Middle East, and you sit down and you have a meal with them, those imaginary lines disappear really quickly. And you find that we all really do want the same things. We want the same lives. We want, we all seek the same happinesses. And so, if you want to criticize governments, by all means, criticize local religions, by all means. But you always have to keep in mind that these people, they're just like us. The borders are, like you said, they're drawn by some person, and they don't really mean anything in the lives of the people we meet.
Who was it who said one of the best cures for bigotry is travel, to go and meet the people that you have othered for so long? I'm fully aware that there are some right now who are screaming about the border wall. We need a wall at the Mexican border because the Mexicans, have come up. The illegals have come up. And yet, there have been so many instances where we are introduced to immigrants and people who are from other countries, our southern border and past, and they meet them and realize that they are people who simply want to escape oppression, who love their families and want their protection, who work hard, who want to share this planet in peace. And you see those walls, you see the bigotries come down and dissipate. You're right. Let's meet the people we share the planet with in good faith. Good things can happen. That's wise, my brother. What else did you want to talk about today?
Well, I had a story that I think you might find interesting. It was my conversion story, and I haven't really heard anyone like it. A little backstory. In 2012, me and my wife came out of the religion that we were raised in by our parents through research and watching videos online and stuff. And I had gotten to a place where I was like, I'm okay with the fact that I don't believe my religion anymore. But I wasn't really interested in taking it any further. I was, okay, I can believe in God. I can believe in heaven and hell, and I don't have to believe my religion that I was raised in. But through my travels, I spend tons of time in hotel rooms, and I pass my time a lot of times watching YouTube. And I was in bed one evening watching some videos and ended up falling asleep. And I had left the autoplay on. So the videos just kept rolling through while I'm sleeping. And I wake up the next morning with these memories of these vivid dreams that I had been having at night. And I had this overwhelming aha moment where I'm like, it all makes sense. I finally get it. And I had never felt it. It was as close, I guess I could say, to a religious experience, for a lack of a better term. But I realized at that moment that I don't believe anymore. And I noticed my YouTube was playing. So I'm like, was that voice in my head is so crystal clear. I could still hear that voice talking to me. So I'm like, was it something I was watching? So I started hitting the back button, back. And I came to a video, and it was Seth Andrews, Christianity Made Me Sound Like an Idiot.
No way. No way.
As soon as I hit play, I'm like, that was the voice in my head. That's what I was listening to. And so I was so focused on that video, watched it intently, and watched another one and another one. I probably spent the next 20 hours doing nothing but watching videos. And it was like that voice in my head that, and I don't know if it was that in my sleep, my cognitive dissonance wasn't able to kick in and shut it down like we've been taught through religion. You know, you hear anything that contradicts, you just shut it down. And it was the first time that I was able to, when I woke up, tell myself, I don't believe. And for the first time, I know why. It all made sense. Every doubt I had had my entire life, every nagging question came pouring back of, I finally understand. And I have wanted to thank you so deeply for the work that you do, because it literally changed my life forever. And I'm so grateful to you.
Dude, I came to you in a dream. Like it was like an apparition that appeared before thee in a dream. That's just a story that I would like to tell at parties. You know, but
it was that face. I mean, the voice you have for radio, it was so soothing and calming, and it just hooked me for the first time. It all just made sense.
Well, that's tremendous for me to hear. You know, I think all of us, no matter where we are, even at a point position somewhere, you know, I think sometimes we have imposter syndrome. You know, do I really deserve to be doing this? There are other people more qualified. Does it really make a difference? And when someone tells you this kind of story, I mean, it just totally blows my mind and makes my day. And you encourage me. You've done the heavy lifting. You're the one who's now living an authentic life on your terms, acknowledging that you don't buy it. I think that's inspiring. And I'm so glad you told me. That's really amazing, man.
Well, if you ever have doubts about your work, just know that there's at least one person out there that owes you more than you'll know.
You're very kind. I hope we get a chance to shake hands in person someday, okay?
No, I'd look forward to that.
All right. Be safe. Thanks again.
Bye.
So if it works like that, could we lull other believers to sleep and then just sneak in and turn the speech on? Like if the defenses are down, would that work? Oh, aren't you sleepy? Go to sleep, da, 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 da. They're out. And then we go and put on a Thinking Atheist podcast. Maybe that's the way in. Maybe that's how we cut through. I don't know. Regardless, I am absolutely blown away by that call. Okay, if you want to go to sleep and listen to our final segment subliminally, now would be the time. I'll be right back after this break. Don't forget, I've got a second podcast of short form true stories. Would love to have you check it out and subscribe. TrueStoriesPodcast.com. 323, are you there? What's your name?
Joel.
Joel, what's on your mind?
Yeah, I was curious about attitudes of evangelical Christians towards Jews while you were still an evangelical Christian. Just for background, I grew up Jewish in a liberal family in Los Angeles. And, you know, there's still a fair amount of Jews here, but it's, you know, there's still a very distinct minority. And, I would get a lot of, I mean, most people were fine, but I would get people either who just could not understand why my family didn't celebrate Christmas, down to kids who would tell me that I had murdered their Lord and things like that. And I was just curious what you saw as attitudes towards Jews when you were still an evangelical Christian.
Oh, gosh, my family honored the Jews. In fact, until my father's death a couple of years ago, I think they had on the back of their car a pro-Israel window sticker to show solidarity for God's chosen people and the Holy Land. You know, they were very much Zionists in that way. They were fans of the Jews, which is weird because I don't believe Jewish tradition holds to Christ or Christ's return. Was that true in your case? Right? You're not a Jesus-oriented culture if you're a Jew.
Jesus is essentially irrelevant to Judaism.
Yeah. Which is, so it's weird to see devout evangelicals who were really very pro-Jewish state honored the Jewish people when the Jewish people in that very important way had kind of rejected Jesus.
You think it was because they really admired the Jewish people, or was it because they thought it was essential for the book of Revelation to play out for the Jews to all go to Israel?
I don't think it's binary. I saw both. My father took us to a film. It was, I couldn't really get into it. I was so young, but it was called The Chosen. And the two characters in the film, one was sort of a mainstream, casual, cultural Jew, and the other was a hardcore Orthodox Jew. And they were both teenagers and their lives intersected. And it was sort of a contrast of cultures, but both of these young men lived under the umbrella of Judaism. And it showed how much they had in common against their differences, becoming human beings, sharing the same space, worshiping the same God. And my father thought that was an amazing story. He had real admiration for the Jewish people. But you bring to light one of the major excuses that white supremacists and other racists and bigots have against Jewish people. They're saying, well, the Jews reject Christ, so we reject the Jews, and we must do so biblically, morally, etc. That's how they excuse bigotry against the Jewish people. It's pathetic.
Do you think that, do you know what people thought about Jewish salvation? I mean, do they think they could still go to heaven even though they didn't accept Jesus?
We never talked about that. I think in my mind, our culture had always just assumed, well, the chosen people are in, man. Say, you're the chosen people. So Yahweh's kind of got your back, right? You've already got the golden ticket. We're not too worried about the Jews. That was but I really do. I think that Christian homes are so varied. The spectrum of this sort of custom-fitted Christianity, from the hardcore to the casual to everybody in between, different interpretations, different Bible translations, different prophets, pastors, agendas, etc. I mean, you can go to any Christian home and ask them about the Jews. You're probably going to get a different answer. But my culture, where I came out of, we were very deferential. We sort of honored the Jewish people because they were indeed chosen. But we are seeing in our headlines today a lot of Bible-thumping Christians who have attacked and continue to attack Jewish people because they rejected Christ, and or maybe they are just simply monstrous, awful people. So have you experienced as far as discrimination in that way? I mean, you live in the United States. Are you feeling that heat?
Not really. I mean, growing up, I would get some ignorance and hostility, and especially kids telling me I'm either going to hell or that we murdered their Lord, things like that. I mean, as an adult, I've gotten very little. I do see a lot of ignorance among other people about Judaism. And like I was having a conversation with a coworker a number of years ago who was an evangelical Christian. And I mean, she could not wrap her head around the fact that Jews did not believe in Jesus, that Jesus was irrelevant.
Help me understand something. This is a conversation I'm interested in. Is being a Jew a belief system, or is it an ethnicity? Like if I was to decide I'm an adherent to Judaism, would I then be a Jew, or is Jew more of a racial question? Or, I mean, are these discussions that people have within Jewish cultures?
To some extent. I mean, Judaism is a religion. It's not an ethnicity, but at least in the States, most Jews are of a particular, the Ashkenazi ethnicity, which is extended from Jews who had settled, many centuries ago in Eastern Europe. So that's my background. And so there's a certain culture associated with it. And, talking about what Jews believe, there's many, many different streams of Judaism, just like in Christianity. I grew up Jewish, but I became an atheist when I was fairly young. And most Jews I know in LA and Los Angeles are not practicing. They're either atheist or just not practicing. But, there's a certain cultural association with, Yiddish culture and some of the holidays and things like that. But most Jews here are not particularly religious.
So it would be akin to, we see Islam more attributed to those of Middle Eastern cultures and ethnicities, but you can be anybody and believe the Quran. You can hold to the religion of Islam. Would that be an accurate?
Oh, sure.
Is that similar to how Judaism works?
Yeah. Like there are Muslims of all stripes, there are Jews of all stripes, but most in the U.S. do fall into either the Ashkenazi or Sephardic ethnicity.
Interesting that, 50% of Jews, I'm trying to remember the study, somebody look it up and fact check me, but it's like roughly half of people who profess Judaism either don't believe in a God or have some significant doubts about God. Does that ring true for you?
At least in my experience, it does. I mean, there are Jewish communities that are very religious, but at least in my experience in Los Angeles, that most Jews are not particularly religious. If they do believe in God, it's sort of in a vague way. A lot of Jews I know who say they believe in God, but, I think it's more they enjoy the culture and celebrating the holidays and going to temple and things like that, but they're not deeply religious at all.
I support that. I love the idea of ritual to frame the human experience. No gods required, so you can enjoy the music and the tradition and the dress and the stuff. You can fashion all of these accoutrements for specific parts of your life, but you don't really necessarily need supernatural thinking to be a part of it. And I think we're seeing this played out within much of the Jewish cultures out there. And I think that's very interesting to watch. It's sort of a non-theistic religion of tradition.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it.
Well, these are interesting questions. All I can say is from my experience, we honored the Jewish people. We wanted a Jewish state. Israel belongs to the Jews kind of thing, against all the opposition. It is a holy war if it must be kind of thing in advance of the return of Christ, which the Jews didn't really believe in. But, welcome to religion, right? Your brain just can compartmentalize at will. But I appreciate your call very much, my friend.
Okay. Thanks, Seth.
All right. Hang in there. We'll see you. I'm going to call it, my friends. Let me finish just by saying that I'm glad that this is a community that transcends borders. We are a globe. We are a planet without border lines. And it's so cool. When I did local radio, we'd have people within the city. There's this sort of broadcast radius that was pretty narrow. But in the age of the internet, I get correspondence from Japan. I hear from listeners in Russia and Brazil and Mexico. And it's crazy. And so we may be an example of humanity without borders, right? Belief systems, convictions about the world, our humanistic values. These are not national values. They are human values, and we are all the human race. Love you much. Have a great week. We'll see you. Bye.
Follow The Thinking Atheist on Facebook and Twitter. For a complete archive of podcasts and videos, products like mugs and t-shirts featuring the Thinking Atheist logo, links to atheist pages and resources, and details on upcoming free thought events and conventions, log on to our website, thethinkingatheist.com.